The Memphis heat hung heavy and thick, a damp blanket over the worn-out streets of Lauderdale courts. Inside their small, cramped apartment, the air felt even heavier, a weight pressed down by the constant struggle of making ends meet. 13-year-old Elvis Presley knew this feeling well. It was the taste of stale bread, the sight of mended clothes, the quiet worry in his mother's eyes. But even amidst the struggle, there was a light, a beacon that always shone brightest for Elvis. His mama Gladys, her laughter, even when rare, was a melody. Her touch, a comfort. Gladys Presley was the heart of their tiny world. A woman who had seen more hardship than any person deserved, yet still found a way to sprinkle magic into their meager lives. She made sure there was food on the table, even if it was just grits and cornbread. She kept their small home clean, a sanctuary from the grime outside, and she listened to Elvis's dreams, no matter how wild or far-fetched they seemed. Elvis sat on the edge of his bed, an old acoustic guitar clutched in his hands. It wasn't much a cheap, well-used instrument, but to him it was a gateway. He strummed a simple chord, the sound resonating through the thin walls. He often imagined playing on grand stages, singing for thousands, but mostly he imagined making enough money so Mama wouldn't have to worry anymore. He glanced over at the kitchen table where Gladys sat poring over a stack of bills, her brow furrowed in concentration. Her hair, usually neat, had a few stray strands escaping, framing a face etched with the lines of stress and tireless effort. Vernon, his daddy, was out working a late shift trying to pull in every possible dime. It was a constant chase, a never-ending scramble for the Presleys. "Mama," Elvis began, his voice soft. "Don't you worry so much." Gladys looked up, offering him a tired smile. "It ain't worrying me, baby, just figuring things out." But her eyes told a different story. Elvis knew what she truly longed for, what she daydreamed about when she thought no one was listening. It wasn't grand mansions or sparkling jewels. It was something simpler, yet utterly out of reach for them. Comfort, security, a touch of beauty. One sweltering afternoon, they had been walking home from the grocery store, the single bag of provisions heavy in Gladys's arms. As they passed a used car lot, a sleek, shiny vehicle caught her eye. It wasn't new, not by a long shot, but it gleamed under the sun, a rich, deep blue. Gladys stopped, her eyes widening just a fraction. My, she'd murmured almost to herself. Wouldn't that be something? Elvis had looked at the car, then back at his mother. He could see the wistful longing in her gaze, a fleeting wish for something so far beyond their reality. It wasn't necessarily the car itself, he realized, but what it represented. Freedom from walking. Freedom from buses, a symbol of ease and luxury they could only dream of. He remembered a day not long after when they were waiting for a bus in the pouring rain. Gladys had shivered, pulling her thin coat tighter, trying to shield them both from the relentless downpour. A large, beautiful car, a Cadillac, had glided past, its occupants dry and comfortable. He saw a flicker of something in his mother's eyes, then a yearning that was quickly masked. But Elvis saw it. He always saw it. He had started noticing Cadillacs after that. They weren't just cars. They were rolling dreams, symbols of a life he wanted for his mama. He'd seen them in magazines, sometimes gleaming on glossy pages, advertising a world of comfort and style. Sometimes they were even pink, a vibrant, audacious pink that seemed to sing of joy and extravagance. He'd torn out one such ad, tucking it away in his Bible. A secret inspiration. Back in the apartment, Elvis strummed another chord. A little more confidently this time. He knew his music was the key. He felt it in his bones, in the way the melodies formed in his head, in the way his voice vibrated with a yearning that was truly his own. He looked at Gladys again, who was now sighing softly, pushing the bills aside. Pictured her in that beautiful car. Not just any car, but her car. Car that would turn heads, not because it was ostentatious, but because it was hers, a testament to her strength and love. And suddenly the pink Cadillac from the magazine ad flashed in his mind. It wasn't just a car, it was a feeling, a celebration, a bold declaration of love. He closed his eyes, imagining the day. His mama, her face lit up with a joy he rarely saw, a joy that chased away all the worry. He imagined the look of disbelief, then pure happiness. It was a promise silently made in his heart, etched into his soul, a promise he swore to keep. "Mama," he said, his voice a little stronger this time, the guitar resting against his knee. "One day I'm gonna buy you the finest car you ever did see. A real beauty." Gladys chuckled. A soft, tired sound. "Oh, Elvis, honey, you just worry about playing your music. That'll be fine enough for me." She didn't believe him. Not really. How could she? They barely had enough for food, but Elvis, watching her, he knew the dream was impossible for now, a star too high to reach, but he would reach it. He would work, he would sing, he would claw his way to it. And when he did, he wouldn't just buy her a car. He'd buy her a car that was so special, so unforgettable, it would make all the years of hardship fade away, even if just for a little while. He'd buy her a pink Cadillac. It was a secret dream, a powerful driving force born out of deep love and a fierce determination. It would be his personal Graceland, for her a piece of heaven on wheels. He held the silent promise close, a secret heartbeat within his chest. The guitar felt heavier, more meaningful now. It wasn't just an instrument, it was the tool, the bridge to that impossible dream. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but for Gladys, for Mama, Elvis would walk every step of it, and he would drive that pink Cadillac right to her door. He picked at a string, the sound humming softly in the quiet apartment. The Memphis night was falling, bringing with it the promise of another sweltering day. But in Elvis's mind there was a different kind of promise, a vibrant, shocking pink one, waiting to burst into life. He just had to make it happen. The melody had a way of getting into Elvis's blood, a rhythm that pulsed beneath his skin. Music wasn't just a hobby, it was an escape, a language he understood better than words. He'd been singing since he was a little boy, first in church, his voice surprisingly strong and clear. Even then, later to the radio, mimicking the blues and gospel singers who filled the airwaves. His daddy Vernon had once bought him his first cheap guitar, a moment Elvis cherished, even though Vernon likely couldn't afford it. That guitar was his confidant, his comfort, and increasingly his hope. Life in Memphis was a hardscrabble existence. Elvis finished high school, then worked various jobs to help support the family. He drove a truck for Crown Electric Company, hauling supplies, his mind often miles away, composing new tunes or refining old ones. He'd work all day, sweat dripping down his back, then come home, grab his guitar and lose himself in the music. Gladys would sit and listen, always. She wasn't a musician herself, but she had an ear for his talent, a mother's fierce belief. "You got a voice, baby," she'd tell him, her eyes twinkling with pride. A real, special voice. Her encouragement was fuel for his fire, igniting his determination to make something more of himself. Not just for himself, but for them, for her. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Elvis collapsed onto the worn sofa. "Mama," he sighed, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. "My back is aching something fierce." Gladys brought him a glass of cool water. "Gotta get us out of this place." He looked around their small apartment, the chipped paint, the sagging furniture. He loved his home because it was theirs, but he also yearned for something better for his parents. "And you will, I know it," Gladys said, her voice soft but firm. With that music of yours, his heart warmed. She truly believed a new idea began to solidify. The pink Cadillac. It wasn't just a fancy dream anymore. It was becoming a concrete goal, a benchmark for his success. He imagined rolling up to their modest apartment in that car, the neighbors' jaws dropping, his mama's face lighting up with pure, unadulterated joy. He started playing small gigs wherever he could. Coffee shops, local bars, even just out on the street corner, sometimes hoping to catch someone's ear. He'd sing those bluesy tunes, sometimes with a gospel twist, sometimes a little country, always with a raw energy that was uniquely his. People would stop and listen, drawn in by his powerful voice and his shy yet magnetic presence. The money was trickling in, mostly in coins and small bills. He'd put every cent he could spare into a jar hidden under his bed. It wasn't much, but it was a start. He imagined the jar filling up, slowly, steadily, transforming into that gleaming pink automobile. One day he was walking past a fancy dealership downtown, a place he usually just hurried by feeling out of place. But something made him stop. There in the showroom window, under the bright lights, sat a brand new Cadillac. It wasn't pink. It was a gleaming white, but it was magnificent. Long, sleek, with chrome shining like diamonds. He pressed his nose against the glass, just drinking it in. The leather interior, the big steering wheel, the sheer size of it. Pictured Gladys behind the wheel, her hands gripping it, a wide smile on her face. He could almost smell the new car smell, could almost feel the smooth ride. This wasn't just transport. It was a statement that said, "We made it." He walked away from the dealership, his steps lighter, his heart buzzing with renewed purpose. That car, or one like it, would be his mama's. And he knew, deep down, that pink was the color. It was bold, it was beautiful, it was unforgettable, just like his mama. He spent hours practicing his guitar, his fingers growing calloused, his voice hoarse from singing. He studied the moves of other performers, adding his own unique flair, twisting and shaking in ways that felt natural to him, even if they sometimes shocked the more conservative audiences. He was developing his own style, a raw, electrifying energy that was beginning to turn heads. "Elvis, you're gonna break something down there?" Gladys would sometimes tease. Watching him gyrate in front of the radio, he'd just grin. "Gotta get the feel for it, Mama. Gotta make him feel it too." He knew he needed to make a bigger splash. Small gigs weren't enough. He needed to be heard, truly heard by someone who could open doors. He dreamed of radio play, of records, of reaching audiences far beyond Memphis. Each dream was a stepping stone, each dollar earned, a brick in the foundation of that future pink Cadillac. He remembered a conversation he'd overheard at the local diner, a couple of musicians talking about a small recording studio on Union Avenue, run by a man named Sam Phillips, who supposedly recorded anyone who walked through his door. The name stuck in Elvis's mind. A tiny spark of possibility. Continued. Working at Crown Electric, saving money, but the thought of Sun Records was like a constant hum in the back of his mind. He didn't have much money to spare, but he knew he had to try. It was a long shot, a crazy gamble, but wasn't everything in their lives. And for Mama, he'd gamble everything. He imagined that pink Cadillac parked proudly outside their home, reflecting the Memphis sun. It was more than a car. It was the embodiment of a promise, a symbol of everything he was striving for. Kept him going through the long hours, the meager earnings, the endless rejection. It was the dream wrapped in chrome and paint, waiting to be driven home. One hot afternoon, after picking up his meager paycheck, Elvis walked past the Cadillac dealership. Again, this time he didn't just look. He paused, letting the vision of the future wash over him. He wasn't sure how or when, but he knew that one day he'd walk into a place like this, perhaps even this very one, and point to the most beautiful car they had, and he'd say, that one's for my mama." The thought filled him with an exhilarating rush, a mixture of fear and fierce determination. He had a voice, a dream, and a mother he loved more than life itself. And soon he hoped he'd have a song that would carry them all the way to that bright pink dream. He just had to make sure he found the right person to hear it, and he had a feeling that person might just be at Sun Records. The small, unassuming building on Union Avenue didn't look like the gateway to a dream. Sun Records was modest, almost hidden amongst the other storefronts in Memphis. But for Elvis Presley, On that sweltering August day in 1953, it felt like the most important place in the world. Clutched his old guitar, his palms sweaty, a mix of nervousness and electric anticipation coursing through him. He'd saved up $4 to record a demo 2 songs. He planned to give his mama as a birthday present, a novelty. But secretly, deeply, he hoped Sam Phillips, the studio owner, would hear something in his voice, something special. He walked into the reception area, where a friendly, no-nonsense woman named Marian Keisker greeted him. She asked him what he wanted to record. "Just a couple of songs for my mama," he mumbled shyly. "My happiness, and that's when your heartaches begin." Marian sensed something in him, a quiet intensity beneath the awkward shyness. She recorded him, and then, perhaps on a hunch, she left the tape running, asking him, "Who do you sound like, Elvis?" Paused, then replied honestly, "I don't sound like nobody." And it was true. He didn't. He sounded like Elvis. Sam Phillips wasn't there that day, but Marian made a mental note. She knew Sam was always looking for a fresh, unique sound, something different that blended genres, something that hadn't been heard before. She left a note for him. "Good ballad singer. Holds great promise. Listen to this boy." Elvis left the studio, the demo record tucked carefully under his arm, a mix of disappointment and faint hope fluttering in his chest. He had done his best. The rest was up to fate. And Sam Phillips, months passed. Elvis continued to work, to save, to dream of that pink Cadillac. He'd occasionally call Sun Records gently, inquiring if Mr. Phillips had listened to his demo each time. The answer was no. The hope began to dwindle, replaced by a familiar sense of resignation. Then one day in June of 1954, Marian Keisker called him. Sam Phillips was looking for a singer to record a song called "Without You." Elvis rushed back to Sun Records, his heart pounding like a drum. The song wasn't quite right for him, but Sam heard him sing, really hurt him. Sam Phillips was a man with an ear for raw talent, a visionary who saw the spark in Elvis. He paired him with 2 local musicians, Scotty Moore on guitar and Bill Black on bass. For days, they tried different songs, different styles, but nothing quite clicked. The tension was building. Then during a break, Elvis started fooling around, picking up an old blues tune, Arthur Crudup's "That's All Right, Mama." He changed the tempo, sped it up, infused it with his own unique energy, an almost manic joy. Scotty and Bill instinctively joined in creating a wild, spontaneous sound that was unlike anything heard before. Sam Phillips, who had been in the control booth, burst out, "What was that? Do that again." They played it again and again. It was rebellious. It was rock and roll before anyone had quite given it that name. Sam knew he had found something extraordinary. "That's All Right, Mama" was recorded, a single released on July 19th, 1954. It was played on local radio stations and the phone lines lit up. People wanted to know who this kid was, this Elvis Presley, who sounded like a white boy singing black music with a voice that soared and twisted in a rhythm that made you want to move. The success was immediate, if small. Elvis was still driving his truck, but now he was also playing gigs, opening for bigger acts, and his name was starting to be whispered around Memphis. The money wasn't pouring in yet, not enough for a Cadillac, but it was coming in steadily, more than he'd ever seen. He was careful with every dollar, every cent, saving it diligently. He called his mama every chance he got. "Mama, they played my song on the radio again. Can you believe it?" Gladys's voice would be filled with tears of joy. "Oh, my baby, I knew you could do it. I just knew it." Her pride was palpable, a warmth that reached across the phone lines. Elvis felt a surge of exhilaration. This was it. This was the start. He was on his way. The pink Cadillac, once a distant fantasy, now seemed a little closer, a little more real. He started calculating in his head, envisioning the payments, the eventual full purchase. It was still a monumental goal, but now it felt attainable. He bought a new suit, a splashy, bright one that made him stand out. He was learning to be an entertainer, to command a stage, to work a crowd. He still had that inherent shyness, but when the music started, something shifted. He became Elvis, the performer, the force of nature. One day he walked by that same Cadillac dealership, but this time he didn't just look in, he walked inside. The salesman, a slick-haired man in a crisp suit, barely gave him a second glance, seeing a young man in casual clothes, but Elvis didn't care. He walked right up to the most magnificent Cadillac on the floor, a shining blue sedan. He ran his hand over the polished fender, the cool metal feeling incredibly solid under his fingertips. "How much for one of these?" he asked, trying to sound nonchalant, like he bought Cadillacs every day. The salesman, with a slight smirk, reeled off a price that made Elvis's jaw drop. It was more than he could imagine. It was a king's ransom, but instead of discouragement, a surge of renewed determination filled him. This was the prize. This was the goal. He would get there. He looked at the car, then pictured it in that vibrant, unforgettable paint. He imagined Gladys smiling, her worries gone, sitting proudly inside. That vision cemented his resolve. This wasn't just about money. It was about love. About keeping a promise he'd made to himself for his mama. Politely thanked the salesman, who still looked skeptical, and walked out. But he carried something new with him, a tangible target. He wasn't just dreaming anymore. He was planning. Every gig, every record sale, every radio play was a step closer. The hum of the Cadillac's engine, the gleam of its paint, became the silent soundtrack to his rising career. Sun Records had been the spark. Now the fire was beginning to roar. And that pink Cadillac was waiting just over the horizon for Mama. The road became Elvis's second home. The Sun Records single, "That's All Right." Mama gained traction, leading to more and more bookings. Soon, Elvis, Scotty, and Bill, now known as the Blue Moon Boys, were crisscrossing the South, playing in small towns and big cities alike. From honky-tonks to high school auditoriums, they brought their electrifying new sound to audiences hungry for something fresh. The touring was grueling. Long hours crammed into a beat-up car, cheap motels, greasy diner food, but Elvis didn't care. Each performance was a chance to connect, to thrill, to earn, and every dollar earned was a step closer to that pink Cadillac for his mama. He'd stand on stage, his lanky frame moving with a raw, almost shocking sensuality, his voice soaring from a whisper to a roar. The crowds, especially the girls, went wild. They screamed. They swooned. Elvis, shy off stage, found a different confidence under the lights. He fed off their energy, giving back every ounce of his passion. After each show, exhausted but exhilarated, he'd meticulously count the money they'd made. A portion went to Scotty and Bill, a portion to expenses, and the rest went straight into his savings. He imagined the stacks of bills slowly growing, transforming into the gleaming chrome and soft leather of that dream car. Phone calls home were a lifeline. He'd call Gladys from dusty payphones, sometimes late at night, just to hear her voice. "Mama, you wouldn't believe it," he'd say, his voice full of wonder. They were screaming so loud I could barely hear myself sing. Gladys would laugh. A warm, reassuring sound. "Oh, my sweet boy, I told you your voice was special." She'd always ask if he was eating enough, if he was getting enough sleep. Her worries were ever present, but so was her immense pride. He never told her about the pink Cadillac directly. It was his secret project, a surprise too precious to hint at. But he'd tell her about his plans. "We're gonna get you out of that small apartment, Mama. Gonna get you a real nice place, and you won't have to work so hard no more." Gladys would always brush it off gently. "You just focus on your music, honey. That's enough for me." But he could hear the hope in her voice, the faint flicker of a dream. She dared not voice. As the months passed, Elvis's fame grew beyond Memphis. He was appearing on regional radio shows, his records selling faster. The tours got bigger, the venues grander. People were starting to recognize him on the street, asking for autographs. The money, while still not astronomical, was definitely accumulating. He was careful, though he'd seen people squander their newfound wealth. He wasn't going to let that happen, not when Mama's dream car was at stake. One day, after a particularly successful show in Texas, Elvis found himself walking past a car dealership. Not just any dealership, but one that specialized in luxury cars. And there it was, in the front window, a stunning brand new 1955 Cadillac Fleetwood Series 60s Special. It wasn't pink. It was a gleaming sapphire blue, but it was utterly magnificent. He stopped, mesmerized. He knew this was the kind of car he was aiming for. He knew the year, the model, the feel of it. He went inside, and this time the salesman greeted him with a bit more respect, recognizing his name, if not his face, fully. He sat in the driver's seat, running his hand over the smooth, cool leather of the steering wheel. The interior smelled of new car, a rich, intoxicating scent. He adjusted the mirror, imagined Gladys sitting beside him, smiling. He envisioned the car exactly like this, but painted a vibrant, bold pink. It would be perfect. How much for one of these custom-painted, he asked, trying to sound casual. The salesman, sensing a serious buyer, quoted him a price. It was still a fortune, but now it felt within reach. He had enough saved for a significant down payment, maybe even enough to buy a good used one outright. But he wanted new. If possible, he wanted the best for his mama. He walked out of the dealership. The image of the blue Cadillac, now mentally transposed into brilliant pink, burned into his mind. He was so close he could almost feel the keys in his hand. The next few months were a blur of touring, recording, and growing fame. Elvis's unique style and magnetic stage presence were captivating the nation. He was no longer just a regional act. He was a phenomenon. His records were climbing the charts. Radio stations across the country were playing his songs. Gladys, meanwhile, was experiencing her own form of fame in Memphis. Neighbors would stop her, congratulating her, telling her how proud she must be. She was immensely. But she was also still Gladys, humble and down to earth, though she couldn't hide the sparkle in her eyes. Elvis knew he was getting close, very close. The jar under his bed was no longer just holding coins. It was filled with wads of cash. He started talking to his manager, Bob Neal, about investing, about bigger deals. He knew he needed someone who understood the music business, someone who could help him reach the very top. Because at the top, that's where the Pink Cadillac was waiting. He felt a nervous thrill, a mix of excitement and disbelief. He, Elvis Presley, son of Vernon and Gladys, from the humble streets of Tupelo and Memphis, was about to achieve a dream that had once seemed utterly impossible. Not for himself, not really, but for Mama's wishes. The roar of the crowd was a reward, but the thought of his mother's face, seeing her dream car, that was the true prize. The road was still long, but the destination, a beautiful pink gleaming destination, was finally in sight. The buzz surrounding Elvis was no longer just a tremor, it was a full-blown earthquake. His appearances on regional radio shows, especially the Louisiana Hayride, were electrifying. The audiences, already primed by his son record singles, were going absolutely wild. He was a sensation, a phenomenon. His name was on everyone's lips, and his face, with that handsome, slightly mischievous grin, was becoming instantly recognizable. One of the places where his impact was felt most profoundly was Nashville. The heart of country music, a place steeped in tradition, suddenly found itself grappling with this raw, rebellious force. Elvis was invited to play at the Grand Ole Opry, a sacred stage for country legends. He went, performed, and while his performance was met with polite applause, the Opry wasn't quite ready for his brand of music. Legend has it, Opry manager Jim Denny advised him to go back to driving trucks. But Elvis, though momentarily disheartened, knew in his heart that he was on the right path. His music might not fit the Opry's mold, but it was certainly finding its audience elsewhere. And those audiences were growing exponentially. This surge in popularity caught the attention of a man who would change Elvis's life forever. Colonel Tom Parker, A matic, shrewd, and utterly relentless promoter, Parker saw in Elvis not just a singer, but a gold mine, a superstar in the making. He was a force of nature, a carnival. Parker turned music manager, and he had big plans for Elvis. The negotiations were swift and decisive. In August 1955, Colonel Parker became Elvis's manager. Parker didn't just manage. He strategized, he promoted, he demanded. He saw the big picture, the national and even international potential, and with Parker on board, the financial landscape shifted dramatically. The money started pouring in, not in trickles or streams, but in torrents. Record sales skyrocketed, concert fees multiplied. Suddenly, Elvis Presley, the boy from Lauderdale courts, was making more money than he could have ever dreamed of. He immediately thought of his family. Gladys and Vernon were still in their small apartment, though things were certainly easier now. He made sure they had enough for everything they needed. And then some, but the big surprise, the ultimate gift, remained his secret. He called Gladys, his voice brimming with excitement. "Ma. The Colonel? He's amazing. He's getting me all these big shows all over the country." Gladys, ever cautious, would say, "Just be careful, honey. Don't let anyone take advantage of you." But he could hear the underlying joy, the relief in her voice. She worried, but she also celebrated his success with every fiber of her being. "Don't you worry, Mama," he'd assure her. "The Colonel's got my back, and soon we're going to be living like kings." He'd catch himself almost spilling the beans about the car. He still wanted it to be a complete, breathtaking surprise. With the financial security that Parker brought, Elvis could finally stop simply dreaming about the Cadillac and start actively planning. He no longer needed to save every penny from his small gigs. Now he had a real income, and a substantial one. He started visiting car dealerships more frequently, openly this time, not just glancing but sitting in different models, feeling the power of the engines, the luxuriousness of the interiors. He'd test drive them, feeling the smooth glide, the effortless power. He found himself drawn to the 1955 Cadillac models. Their lines, their presence, their undeniable elegance. Talked to salesmen, asking about custom paint jobs, about special orders. He wanted something unique, something that truly reflected his mama's vibrant spirit and his boundless love for her, and he kept coming back to the idea of pink. It wasn't a common color for a car, especially not for a luxury sedan, which made it all the more special. It would be Gladys's Cadillac. He saw a blue one. He liked a beautiful Fleetwood series, 60 special, and for a moment he considered just buying that and having it repainted. But he decided to hold out to see if he could find something even more perfect. The thrill of the hunt was immense. He was living a dream, and now he was about to fulfill one of his deepest desires, not for himself but for the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. He pictured the moment he would unveil it to her, her face probably a mixture of shock and disbelief, then melting into pure, unadulterated joy. He wanted to give her something that would symbolize their journey, a tangible representation of how far they had come from those struggling days in Tupelo and Lauderdale courts. Constant travel, the screaming fans, the grueling schedule. It all felt worthwhile. Every single moment of exhaustion and homesickness, waiting to be driven home to his mama. He made discreet inquiries. Where could he find a truly special Cadillac? Did any dealerships have one already in a unique color, or could a custom job be arranged quickly? He wanted it soon as possible. The antecedent is almost impossible. The antecedent as soon as possible. He was a young man with more money than he'd ever imagined, and his first thought, his driving obsession, was to use it to bring unimaginable joy to his mother. Pink Cadillac was no longer just a goal. It was a certainty. He felt it in his bones. He was ready to make the biggest purchase of his life, and it wasn't for him. It was for Mama. And soon, very soon, she would see it. The Nashville tremor had turned into a full-scale earthquake of fame and fortune, and that earthquake was about to deliver a pink surprise right to Gladys Presley's door. The Colonel's management had opened doors. Elvis never even knew existed, doors to a world of endless possibility and, crucially, financial freedom. Now Elvis wasn't just making a living, he was building an empire. And with that empire, the pink Cadillac for his mama was no longer a distant fantasy. It was an imminent reality. He had decided definitively on the color. Pink, not just any pink, but a soft, almost rose petal pink, yet vibrant enough to make a statement. It was a bold choice for a car, especially a Cadillac. But Elvis knew it was right. It was unique, just like his mama. It was beautiful, just like his mama. And it was a little bit daring, just like the spirit he now brought to the stage. His obsession was singular. He had enough money to buy any car he wanted for himself, and he did buy cars. Sometimes impulsively, enjoying his new wealth. But the Pink Cadillac, this was about Gladys' search. He wasn't just looking in Memphis anymore. His tours were taking him all over the South, providing ample opportunities to visit dealerships in various cities. He'd sneak away whenever he had a free moment, slipping into showrooms, always keeping his true intention a secret. He didn't want anyone to spoil the surprise for Gladys. Not a word. He learned quickly that finding a brand new Cadillac in the exact shade of pink he envisioned was nearly impossible. Car manufacturers simply didn't offer that color as a standard option for such a prestigious model. He considered having one custom painted, but the process was lengthy and he was impatient. He wanted to see his mama's face light up as soon as possible, so he shifted his focus. He started looking for a used Cadillac, a solid, well-maintained one that he could then have repainted. He preferred the 1955 Fleetwood Series 60 Special, with its elegant lines and spacious interior. It was a car that commanded respect, a car fit for a queen, and Gladys was certainly his queen. The search was both thrilling and frustrating. He'd see Cadillacs, beautiful ones, in blue or black or white, but none of them felt quite right. He had a very specific vision in his mind, and he wouldn't settle for anything less for his mama. He'd spent hours poring over newspaper ads, asking discreet questions to mechanics and car enthusiasts. He met on the road. He was relentless. The image of Gladys's joy fueled his every step. One afternoon, in a town he couldn't even recall the name of after the blur of touring, he walked into a small independent car lot. It was dusty, a bit disorganized, but as his eyes scanned the vehicles, he stopped dead. There it was. Not a Cadillac. Not yet. It was a 1955 Fleetwood, but it was blue. A stunning, rich blue. It wasn't the pink he'd dreamed of, but something about this specific car called to him. It had a presence. It felt right. He circled it slowly, examining every detail. Chrome gleamed. The tires looked good. The body seemed solid. He opened the door, inhaling the faint scent of old leather and something akin to possibility. He sat behind the wheel, his hands gripping the smooth plastic. It felt powerful, substantial. This was the one, he knew it. He talked to the dealer, a grizzled old man with kind eyes. Elvis, trying to keep his identity under wraps, introduced himself simply as E. Presley. He asked about the car's history, its condition. He then asked the crucial question. Do you know anyone who does custom paint jobs? A really good one? The dealer scratched his chin. Well, there's old Arthur down the road. He's a bit of an artist with a spray gun. What color you got in mind, son? Elvis hesitated for a moment, then, with a mischievous grin, leaned in conspiratorially. Pink. A very specific kind of pink. The dealer blinked, then let out a hearty laugh. Pink, you say? Well, now that'll certainly turn heads. Arthur's done some wild jobs, but a pink Cadillac, that's a first. Elvis negotiated the price for the blue Cadillac. A fair sum, but well within his new means. He then arranged for the car to be driven to Arthur's shop. He provided a very specific sample of the pink he wanted, a swatch of fabric he'd secretly bought, or perhaps a color chip from a magazine. He left detailed instructions, emphasizing the perfection he expected. The wait was agonizing. He continued his touring, but his mind was often miles away, picturing the Cadillac in its new, glorious hue. Called Arthur's shop frequently, asking for updates, urging him to hurry, but also to be meticulous. He knew this was more than just a car. It was a monument to his love, a symbol of their journey. He wanted it to be perfect, flawless, a reflection of the deep affection he held for his mother. The thought of her reaction, the sheer surprise and joy on her face, kept him going through the endless travel and the growing demands of his burgeoning fame. He was bursting to tell someone to share his excitement, but he held firm. This was his secret, his personal mission, and it had to be revealed in the most spectacular way possible. The Pink Cadillac was taking shape, miles away. A masterpiece slowly coming to life, destined for the woman who deserved nothing less than the extraordinary. The obsession was real, and it was about to pay off in the most heartwarming way imaginable. The blue Cadillac was waiting for its transformation in a small, dusty garage belonging to old Arthur, the painter, somewhere in Florida. Elvis was there on tour, playing to sold-out crowds, his star rising meteorically. But amidst the roar of the fans and the relentless schedule, his mind was singularly focused on the car. He'd bought the 1955 Fleetwood Series 60 Special, its original paint, a dignified sapphire blue. It was a beautiful car, solid and classic, but for Gladys, dignified simply wouldn't do. He wanted something bold, something memorable, something that screamed, "Elvis loves Mama." He'd given Arthur precise instructions, a specific shade of Gaguen rose pink, a color he'd seen on a scarf his mother once admired, or perhaps in a magazine. A one-of-a-kind creation. Arthur, initially amused by the request, had promised to do his best. Elvis had snatched moments between rehearsals and performances to check on the progress. He'd slip away sometimes with Scotty and Bill, who were sworn to secrecy, other times alone just to gaze at the car. He watched as Arthur, a quiet, meticulous man with paint splatters on his overalls, worked his magic, first the sanding, stripping away the old blue, then the primer. A dull, flat gray, it looked like any other car, then just an empty shell, but then came the first coat of pink. Elvis remembered the moment Arthur sprayed the first whisper of color onto the sleek metal. It wasn't the vibrant finished product yet, but a soft, almost ethereal mist of pink. His heart had skipped a beat. It was happening. His mama's car was coming to life. He'd stand there for what felt like hours, watching the paint dry, smelling the faint chemical scent, lost in the future. He could already picture Gladys's face. He'd imagine her running her hand over the smooth, glossy surface, her eyes wide with disbelief and joy. During one of his visits, a problem arose. Arthur, ever the perfectionist, noticed a tiny flaw in one of the door panels. After the second coat, it wasn't much, barely noticeable to anyone else, but Arthur insisted on redoing it. Elvis, though impatient, understood. He wanted perfection for his mother. "Do whatever it takes, Arthur," he'd said, his voice firm. The extra delay was hard to bear, but it only intensified his anticipation. He was scheduled to perform in a few more cities before heading back to Memphis for a short break. It was crucial that the car was ready before he left Florida. He wanted to drive it home himself, or at least supervise its journey. Finally, the day arrived. Cadillac stood in Arthur's garage, gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. A magnificent vision in vibrant eye-popping pink. It was everything Elvis had dreamed of, and more. The color was rich, deep, and utterly unapologetic. Chrome shone. The tires were new, and the interior, while not custom dyed, was spotless and plush. Elvis walked around it slowly, reverently, his hand lightly tracing the curves of the fender. He grinned a wide, boyish grin that rarely surfaced these days with the pressures of fame. This was it. This was Mama's car, paid Arthur, shaking his hand warmly, thanking him profusely. "You're a true artist, Arthur," he said genuinely. Arthur just smiled. "Never thought I'd paint a pink Cadillac, but I gotta say it suits her." Elvis arranged for the car to be driven to a secure private garage near the edge of town, where it would be stored until he could personally oversee its transport back to Memphis. He didn't want any public sightings, any gossip, any hint that might reach his mother's ears. He bought a large, thick canvas tarp, something to cover the car completely. Hiding its distinctive color, he planned the logistics carefully. He would finish his Florida dates, then drive the Cadillac himself, or have a trusted friend drive it under cover of darkness, all the way to Memphis. He could barely sleep, his mind racing with plans and dreams. He was on the cusp of something truly monumental, not in his career but in his personal life, in his relationship with a woman who meant a world to him. Pictured the open road, the pink Cadillac coming along carrying his love home. The long drive, the careful secrecy, the endless miles, it would all be worth it for that single moment. That look on Gladys's face, the journey from Tupelo to Memphis, had been long and hard. Now, a different journey from Florida to Memphis promised a joyous new chapter paved with the deepest shade of pink. The Florida sun had barely begun to dip below the horizon, casting long purple shadows across the highway, when Elvis, disguised in a cap and sunglasses, pulled out of the private garage. Behind him, on a flatbed tow truck carefully covered by a thick canvas tarp, was the most beautiful car he had ever seen. Mama's pink Cadillac. He couldn't risk driving it himself, not yet. Not openly, it was too conspicuous. News traveled fast and he wanted this surprise to be absolute. He had hired a trusted, discreet friend, a fellow musician named Billy, to drive the tow truck, while Elvis followed closely in his own regular car. The journey was long, stretching over hundreds of miles through the quiet backroads and then onto the open highways, all under the cloak of night. Elvis was exhausted from weeks of touring, but an adrenaline-fueled excitement kept him wide awake. Every mile was a step closer to his mama's joy. He kept glancing in his rear-view mirror, making sure the truck and its precious cargo were still there, still hidden. The tarp was fastened securely, but he imagined a corner flapping in the wind, just enough to reveal a flash of bright pink, sending whispers echoing across the land. Before he was ready, he was paranoid, but for good reason. This was more than just a car. It was a dream, fragile until it was realized. The roads were mostly empty in the late hours. The hum of his own engine, the distant rumble of the tow truck. It was the soundtrack to his clandestine mission. He thought about Gladys, sleeping peacefully in Memphis, completely unaware of the magnificent surprise rolling towards her. A soft smile touched his lips. There were a few close calls. Once a state trooper pulled up alongside the tow truck, his cruiser lights flashing briefly before he sped off. Just checking on things. Elvis's heart had leaped into his throat. He'd held his breath, fearing the tarp might somehow slip, revealing the shocking color beneath, but the trooper had simply passed by. Oblivious another time, they pulled into a dimly lit gas station. Elvis instructed Billy to park the tow truck as far away as possible, near the back, under the shadow of a large oak tree. He jumped out of his car, pulling his hat lower, trying to be inconspicuous. He walked over to the truck just to check on the tarp, to make sure it was still securely fastened. He ran his hand over the fabric, feeling the shape of the car beneath, a ghost of its vibrant color, still thrilling him even through the canvas. A couple of truck drivers were inside the gas station talking loudly. Elvis kept his head down, grabbing a couple of sodas and snacks. He heard that Elvis Presley fellas make a fortune. Wonder what he spends it on. Elvis almost choked on his soda. He grinned into his hand. You have no idea, he thought. You have no idea what it's for. The nights were long, but the morning brought a new urgency. They were getting closer to Memphis. He knew they couldn't risk driving through the city in broad daylight with the car in a tow truck. Too many prying eyes, too many opportunities for the secret to get out. He had arranged for a friend with a large, secluded garage on the outskirts of Memphis to store the car for a few hours. They pulled in just as dawn was breaking, the sky turning a soft pre-sunrise gray. Billy expertly backed the tow truck into the garage. Elvis helped him carefully unfasten the tarp. The moment the canvas slid away, revealing the gleaming, audacious pink. A gasp escaped his lips. Even after seeing it finished, fully painted, The sight of it still took his breath away. It was magnificent. Chrome sparkled, the paint shone with an almost liquid quality, reflecting the dim garage lights like a jewel. "Well, I'll be," Billy whistled, impressed. "That's something else, Elvis. She's gonna love it." Elvis just nodded, speechless, his eyes fixed on the car. "Yeah," he finally managed, his voice thick with emotion. "She is." They carefully unhooked the Cadillac from the tow truck, and Elvis with immense care drove it slowly into a corner of the garage, tucked away out of sight. He lingered for a moment, just looking at it, letting the reality sink in. It was here, his mama's pink Cadillac. He secured the garage, thanked Billy profusely, and drove home, utterly exhausted but brimming with a triumphant joy. The secret was safe, for now the hardest part of the journey was over. Now came the moment he had been dreaming of for years, the moment of revelation. He couldn't wait to see his mama's face when she finally saw her dream car, a dream he had worked so hard to make come true. The surprise was mere hours away. Elvis could barely sleep. He tossed and turned, his mind racing with plans for the big reveal. It was Saturday morning, and Gladys would be getting ready for her usual routine of errands and housework. Perfect. The weather forecast was clear and sunny. Perfect. The pink Cadillac was tucked away in his friend's garage just outside of town, sparkling and ready perfect. He wanted to make it special, not just a simple drive up and present. It had to be unforgettable, a moment etched in their memories forever. He decided he would pick up the car himself, drive it to their neighborhood, and then somehow bring Gladys to it without her suspecting a thing. He woke up early, feeling a nervous energy that vibrated through his whole body. He showered, dressed in his favorite casual clothes, a crisp shirt, dark trousers. Trying to look normal, he headed to the kitchen, where Gladys was already awake, humming a gospel tune as she brewed coffee. "Morning, Mama," he said, trying to sound nonchalant, but his voice was a little too bright. Gladys turned her tired eyes, softening as they always did when she saw him. "Morning, baby. You're up early. Got a busy day?" "Kinda," he mumbled, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Thought I'd go out and, run a few errands, pick up something special for you," Gladys chuckled, waving a dismissive hand. "Oh, you don't need to get me anything, honey. Just you being home is present enough." She had no idea the scale of the something special he had in mind. He knew he couldn't bring the car directly to their apartment building. Lauderdale Courts was too public, too many windows, too many curious neighbors. He needed a place nearby but secluded. He remembered an empty lot, just a couple of blocks away, usually used by kids for playing baseball, but deserted on Saturday mornings. "Mama," he began, trying to sound casual, "I need your opinion on something. Something I saw down the street. Could you walk with me for a minute?" Gladys looked at him, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. "What is it, Elvis? You got some new mischief up your sleeve?" He just grinned. "Nothing but good mischief, Mama. Come on. It won't take a minute." She sighed, good-naturedly, drying her hands on a dish towel. All right. Lead the way, Mr. Presley." His heart hammered against his ribs as they walked out of the apartment building and turned down the street. Kept glancing over his shoulder, checking for any early risers or nosy neighbors. The air was fresh, the sun warming their backs. As they approached the empty lot, Elvis could see it. He had positioned the pink Cadillac, perfectly angled so the morning sun hit its gleaming surface, making it sparkle like a giant precious gem. It was almost blindingly beautiful. He had also left a large satin bow on the hood, a silly celebratory touch he knew his mama would secretly love. Gladys was still a few steps behind him, chatting about something inconsequential. He stopped dead at the edge of the lot, blocking her view slightly, and then stepped aside, sweeping his arm out in a grand gesture. "Surprise, Mama." Gladys followed his gaze, her eyes scanning the empty lot, then widening as they landed on the impossible sight. She stopped, frozen in place, her mouth falling slightly open. The pink Cadillac sat there, magnificent, vibrant, glowing. Its chrome bumpers shone like mirrors reflecting the light. The tires were new, the windows spotless. It looked like it had just rolled off a futuristic assembly line, utterly out of place in their humble neighborhood, yet completely, unbelievably real. "Elvis," she whispered. He watched her face, utterly mesmerized. The initial shock gave way to disbelief, then a slow dawning comprehension. Her eyes, usually so filled with quiet worry, now brimmed with unshed tears. "It's for you, Mama," he said, his own voice thick with emotion, his carefully rehearsed casualness completely abandoned. "It's your car, your very own Cadillac." Gladys took a hesitant step forward, then another, as if approaching a mirage. She reached out a trembling hand, running her fingers along the smooth, cool paint of the fender. It felt real. It wasn't a dream. My car," she repeated, tears now freely spilling down her cheeks. "A Cadillac pink." She looked at him, her eyes wide, with a mixture of overwhelming gratitude and utter bewilderment. "Oh, Elvis, honey, you really didn't." He just nodded, a huge, relieved grin spreading across his face. "I did, Mama, I promised, remember? I promised you something beautiful." She threw her arms around him, burying her face in his shoulder, sobbing openly now. "Oh, my sweet boy," she choked out, her words muffled. "My beautiful, generous boy." It was the most heartwarming sound he had ever heard. All the long hours, the endless miles, the secret planning, the constant worry about money. It all dissolved in that moment, replaced by the pure, unadulterated joy radiating from his mother. Pink Cadillac might have been a symbol of his success, but her tears of happiness were his true reward. Gladys Presley stood before her new pink Cadillac, tears still streaming down her face, but now mixed with a joyful, disbelieving laughter. She kept touching the car, running her hand over the gleaming pink paint, tracing the chrome trim, as if to convince herself it was real. I can't believe it, Elvis," she whispered, turning to him, her eyes shining like stars. "A pink Cadillac for me, for you, Mama," he confirmed, his heart swelling with pride. "Only the best for you." He opened the driver's side door for her. "Come on, get in, take her for a spin." "Oh, I don't know, honey. It's so fancy." "It's yours, Mama," he insisted, gently helping her into the plush driver's seat. She settled in her hands, gripping the large, smooth steering wheel, her eyes wide as she took in the opulent interior. The rich scent of new car filled the air. Elvis quickly jumped into the passenger seat beside her. "Put the key in, Mama." With trembling fingers, she inserted the key into the ignition. He leaned over, guiding her hand to start the powerful engine. The Cadillac purred to life, a low, contented rumble that vibrated through the car. Gladys gasped a genuine sound of wonder. "It's so quiet," she murmured. "Like a dream." He showed her how to shift into drive, how to release the parking brake gently, hesitantly. She pressed the accelerator. The magnificent car glided forward silently at first, then picking up speed as Gladys slowly gained confidence. She drove it around the empty lot, a wide, unstoppable grin spreading across her face. It was a joy to behold. Gladys, who had walked miles in orange shoes, waited for countless buses, in the heat and rain, was now cruising in the lap of luxury, in a car that shouted defiance at all the hardships they had ever known. Soon neighbors started to emerge, drawn by the unusual sight of a sparkling pink car in their humble neighborhood. Whispers started, then murmurs, then exclamations. "Is that a pink Cadillac? Whose is that?" And then, as they recognized the young man in the passenger seat, a wave of understanding and awe washed over them. "It's Elvis, and it's for Gladys." Gladys, usually reserved, waved happily at them from behind the wheel of her new chariot. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright with uncontainable joy. She was no longer just Gladys Presley, the worried mother. She was Gladys Presley, the proud owner of a pink Cadillac, a testament to her son's success and boundless love. Elvis knew this car wasn't just a gift. It was the physical embodiment of his promise, the culmination of years of struggle, sacrifice, and unrelenting dreams. It represented every penny saved, every song sung, every mile traveled. It was a monument to their journey from the desperate poverty of Tupelo to this moment of unimaginable triumph. The Pink Cadillac became legendary. It wasn't just a car, it became an icon almost as famous as Elvis himself. It represented a son's devotion, a mother's unwavering faith, and the incredible American dream realized. Gladys drove it proudly, though always carefully, sometimes taking Elvis for a ride, sometimes just going for a leisurely cruise around Memphis, savoring every moment. When they eventually moved into a grander house, a true home for the family, the Pink Cadillac was always parked prominently in the driveway, a vibrant splash of color against the green lawn, a permanent reminder of where they came from and how far they had come. The car, however, just a few months after Elvis bought it, while on tour, his drummer, DJ Fontana, drove it, and it caught fire on the side of the road. It was destroyed. Elvis was devastated, but not for long. He immediately bought Gladys another Cadillac, painted it the exact same iconic pink, ensuring his mother's dream lived on. That second Pink Cadillac became the one forever immortalized in history. The true Mama's Cadillac. The memory of that first unveiling, the pure shock and then the overwhelming joy on Gladys's face remained etched in Elvis's heart. It was a moment of profound connection, a silent affirmation of their unbreakable bond. The Pink Cadillac wasn't just metal and paint. It was a physical manifestation of love, sacrifice, and dreams come true. It was a testament to the fact that even from the humblest beginnings, with enough heart and determination, and a whole lot of soul, impossible dreams could indeed become wonderfully. And for Elvis and his mama, that Pink Cadillac forever stood as the shining symbol of their incredible, heartwarming journey.